So welcome to all of you who are joining us for this closing ceremony. And thank you to everyone who has been with us throughout the past 5 weeks and will continue watching the sessions on YouTube, and will continue sharing them to support our speakers and to support the ideas that and the stories that have come out of these sessions. I would want to say that I'm inspired, which I am, but I think I'm definitely much more aware. And for me, it's really showing up in like a feeling of a bit of nausea, frankly, and like a lump in my throat, because some of the sessions I've been listening to, they're issues that, even though Mala and I planned this event, I still was surprised and shocked at how little awareness of some things I had. And I've already changed some of my behaviors and will continue to change them. So I'm grateful that we did this. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Viji, who is our leader for today, for this closing session on courageous leadership. And the three of us will try to do justice to Viji's amazing questions. And hopefully we can learn together in this last session of Awake, Aware, Arise. So Viji, over to you.
Thank you so much, Magda. Delighted to be here. And I must say excited as well. It's always that feeling of, yeah, it's over. And yet to say it's the last session, let's make this count. And I'm coming in with that frame today. Just want to context, the reason for this topic, or the frame for this topic, just so we all can take away best learnings from today, including the four of us. There have been a lot of conversations in the last 8 months. And I think the last 8 months, the world has literally changed upside down. It's also been a time, despite all of the hardships and all the chaos, it's also been a time where there was a calling for a lot of people to rise to the occasion. And while we see the obvious frontline soldiers do it, I think every profession has been challenged in some ways to really show up. And I think for a lot of professionals, it's also been about courage. Showing up despite their own fears with courage, not an easy task. And I know I've had conversations with Ram and Cindy and Magda very casually from time to time. And that was the inspiration for today, to say, why don't we just take this to the larger community? And I know most of us here on this call today are professionals in one way or the other. And just have a little bit of, a dialogue, a discussion. And hopefully we bring in our own life experiences in general and in the past 8 months. And with that diversity to guide us, we jump right in. With that context, I just want to start off. So we're going to explore a few questions, not easy ones. And certainly there are no right and wrong answers. So do forgive any of us if we say something that doesn't sit well, but we want this conversation to be as authentic as it can be. So there are 2 or 3 aspects that we want to unpack today. The first of it being this whole notion of being a professional and profession. So I want to start off with you, Cindy, and really ask you, and we'll just go around, right? And I'll jump in last. What does it mean to you to be a professional? And how do you see yourself around it?
I'm sitting here thinking how strange this is for me, because for the past 4 weeks, I've been talking about racism and biases and gender inequalities and social progress. The topics have been current topics and outward ones. And I'm thinking to myself, any minute now, I'm going to have to start talking about myself. And I have no idea what I'm going to say about myself. So that's a good question. What does professionalism mean to me? I think within different context, it shows up slightly differently. I think there are some core values that I hold close to myself, as in always showing up, giving up my best in whatever I'm doing, listening first, and then responding. And I think on a more contextual basis, it also means developing myself, putting myself into a learning space, a discomfort space, so that I can also grow and be better at what I do. It also means, I want to say credentialing, but that's only within the context of coaching. I'll just say self-developing. And I think I like the space of becoming more aware, more awakened, and arising to whatever is showing up. I leave it there.
Yeah, that's powerful, Cindy. And it's taking me into a reflective space because I didn't connect with that dimension, very spontaneously. But would love to know a little bit more as we go along. Magda, where are you on this?
So the word, it's a funny word because there's profession, there's being a professional, and then there's behaving professionally, which are so different for me, at least. The profession is what I do, the thing that I am able to confidently exhibit, talk about, do in the world, how I contribute work-wise, I suppose, is when I think about profession. When I think about behaving professionally, being a professional, I think it's about competence and knowing what you don't know and continuous development. But behaving professionally is one that I struggle with a lot. As anyone who's ever even seen me on these webinars, like when I'm with people, I have a very hard time kind of separating behaviors or being different when I'm acting professionally versus acting less familiarly with my friends and colleagues, because I'm a big believer in you are what you are. So I think I'm interested to hear what Ram actually says, because our worlds are so blended, and I've known Ram first as just the father of a friend, and then I got to know him as a person, and then as a coworker, and I feel like I've maybe been the same kind of person. So was I professional with you? Was I not? I don't know. It's a funny one for me.
Ram, the baton's passed to you.
Okay, let me put it this way. If you take it from the Jungian perspective, many of those who are familiar with the psychological aspect of it, you tend to put on a persona, a facade, which is what you think you want other people to see you. Unfortunately, the mirror side of the persona is the shadow, where the negativities that you have, they show up even if you aren't quite aware of them. Whereas if you go to what he calls the part of self, where the shadow and the persona merge kind of a stuff, and if you're able to present that would be the ideal way of presenting oneself. So when we attempt to be professional, for instance, let's say, for the last several years, I have been pretending to be a coach, and people seem to think that I'm a coach. Now, like Magda says, what do I think really? What am I supposed to present myself as? So very often this question arises for me, when I come into situation, the other day I was sharing my wife, who's my mentor coach, as it were. I was out for a walk and there was this guy who was blustering about telling somebody what to do. I really lost my cool the second or the third time when I saw that happening. And basically I told him to shut up. So when I told her, so that you're not being a coach. If you were really a coach, you should have asked him what is making you uncomfortable with other person's behavior. So I wasn't being professional. I wasn't really being what I pretended to be. So it's all very easy. When this is despite the fact that I believe I have to a large extent cleansed myself and accept myself for what I am. But then I see many people who call themselves coaches who have such severe baggages, they have problem in accepting themselves for what they are. And then they try to coach other people. I wonder sometimes, how does that work really? Is that really a professional way of doing it? So I think professionalism to a large extent, I think, depends on two things. Whether what you wish to be in terms of the work that you do, which you might call a profession, is really what you truly believe you ought to be doing. Are you just doing it for filling your stomach, as it were, as a transactional operation? Then you can integrate the two aspects. And even when you do integrate, you're going to come up these kind of situations like I faced, where, fine, this is what I am. I'm a screwed up person. So once in a while, this is the way I'm going to behave. So that's okay. Fortunately, I've got a wife who's probably able to mentor me. So yeah, that's where I would like to leave it at in terms of, yeah, we are all professional till probably we are shown up to be unprofessional, as it were.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's wonderful, Magda, because I listen to authenticity coming out as a very strong theme, because for all you said that, you know, the way you've been showing up, etc. In my mind, you know, in my mind, I reference you as a professional, right? I think the kind of, you know, you took a never been done thing, right? I'm even talking about the present conference, and just made it happen. And you know, it was about doing that with that kind of a strong work ethic. And I think Ram also brought in this whole bit about saying, you know, in your behavior as a coach, are you really being a coach? I'm going to build on both of that and talk about my understanding of this whole thing about being a professional and professionalism. To me, simply put, it is about the conduct or qualities that characterize a profession or a professional person. And I take a lot of pride in identifying myself professionally as a coach. And I think coaching is a profession. And when you say it's a profession carries with it an inherent characteristic of a spirit of service, strong work ethic, and commitment to excellence. You know, you want to just keep raising the bar. And fourthly, I think it's also about having a strong professional code, whether it may be expressed or even implied. Personally, for me, I think, like you said, Magda, it's not just being in a profession, but I think professionalism, and this is a little bit of, you know, it seems paradoxical, it's been a strong value in my personal life as well. And probably I attribute this to 2 or 3 things: having early childhood role models, like my father, who had a very strong work ethic and used to say, work is worship. I was fortunate to undergo, education that made me a professional, my legal education. And there would always be conversations and narratives around being part of the profession, so to say. So I think today, in my vocation and profession as a coach, I am trying to reach that invisible professional bar every day. I know it's not a regulated industry, but in my mind, being a professional means there is that invisible bar that I want to try to get to. I'm wondering what's coming up in the chat box. I've not been seeing that. And I would love to invite whoever's joined us today, please jump into the conversation. Whatever questions are going around here, please put into the chat box, where are you on this? Because I think, everyone here today, by the fact that we've shown up, is competent and, has the right to talk about this today. And we must.
Yeah, and I also would like to encourage everyone to, as the question implies to us, as we're answering it, if they could also just answer it, we'd like to hear from them too around the questions we're asking.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want me to go ahead, Vijay, and pick up?
Yeah, you can. But I just saw one beautiful comment from R.R. Nair. And, it says, a jigsaw with many pieces: expertise, reliable, respectful, honest, and self-aware. I think that's beautiful. Very, very powerful definition that's come up there. And Revan is talking about authenticity. And there's also this point about when does a profession become a calling? But I think we'll come to that in a bit, Cindy. I think, please go on.
Okay, so just to place you or frame this, we just got some beautiful questions here, and we're going to take a shot at answering these questions as best as we can. I mean, we include you, so please, as I ask this next question, type your thoughts into the chat box. So on this point of leadership, Magda, I think, oh no, now it feels like we're going in a order. We shouldn't. Ram, question is for you. On leadership, what are the qualities in yourself that you recognize towards being a self-leader? And how does this apply to leading others?
Cindy, the only way that I can really answer that is the moment I start becoming or believing that I'm a leader, I stop being a leader. It's as simple as that. At one level, if you, let's say from the perspective of some of the greatest leaders of this world, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, and people like that, their entire ethos of being a leader was, as they said, to follow the followers. And they were there really to serve. And that's where the whole concept of what today we call as a servant leadership arises. Who are you as a leader? It's not about leading somebody. Are you really serving somebody? Are you serving a cause, a larger cause than yourself? But unfortunately, if you are looking at the hierarchical manifestation of the corporate world, while you can be a bottom-up person, you can listen to people, do all that kind of a stuff, there is still an expectation that when things get going harder and harder, there's someone who's at the end of the day has to sort of, the buck stops there. They've got to make the call. They have to make the decision. So one of the things that I have discovered over my life, because I was thrust into some kind of leadership roles in terms of corporate management at a fairly young age at that point in time, as things were. Probably I wasn't even 40 because before I became a CEO. And the chair that I sat had only one leg, didn't have four to support me. So it took a lot of juggling to be able to balance in that role. And one of the things that I had to learn was to try and take as much as I could from people around me, and not trying to be the person who was a know-it-all, which I was before that. Because earlier it was all about proving myself that I knew everything that needed to be done. And that was okay, because there was somebody else to carry that can above me. But here there wasn't, and I had to be that last point at the stop. And so what I learned by trial and error was that, especially in a corporate space or even in any other organized space in leadership, the leadership is not how skilled you are or how good you are in what you do in a profession, as it were, but how good you are in identifying people who are better than who you are in doing things, and to be able to influence, motivate, and inspire them. That's the only way that you can truly be a leader. And you might call it by many names today, people engagement and so on and so forth. But I think the simple trick, and which is what I find today more and more when I'm coaching leaders who are called general managers, VPs, and CXOs, but they're all still, in a sense, mired in that desperate attempt to prove themselves to be the best in their profession, best in their function, best in what they have done in the past. And that limits them. They can't go any further. When you are in a real leadership position as a CEO, you just cannot be, however good you are, to be the best in every single function, every single space that you operate. All that you need to know is who probably is the best in your team to do a particular thing, a particular function, and to be able to identify, influence, and inspire them. So that's, to me, is probably the best way of how you can manifest leadership. Thank you.
Can I go next, Cindy? So you and I have had conversations on self-leadership. And, I've cherished those because I think it's, it allowed me to really be in touch with who I am and who I am showing up as. Because as Ram said, it's not just about leading others. So if you ask me the dimensions of self-leadership that hold meaning for me, I would think it's purpose. Yeah, very strong sense of purpose, and integrity above all else. Who you are really in the dark. Passion, and I would say more than, this is a new term that I had written down for myself, which is learning humility. The ability to, fail and still learn and be absolutely humble about it and to say you don't know. So this can show up irrespective of who you are, whether, you're a CXO, you are a top-notch coach, you are leading a family, doesn't really matter. These qualities are and traits are who you actually show up as. Leading others, I think at the heart of it is simply a systemic response and responding to a systemic call. So it's not about a role or a designation or a position. But again, when there is a collective calling and there is, the system needs you, you show up. And when you do that, you are again bringing in all of yourself authentic in your own skin. So self-leadership, which is all about how you lead your own life, I think is truly the first step before you can lead others. I pause here, Cindy.
So I'll jump in then. To me, I have a very specific view of what leadership is and how I try to exude that. Partly because I've had some experience with some not so great leaders and some really great ones. And I try to learn from the ones that weren't so great, especially to not be like them. But for me, the number one thing about being a leader is being part of that team, that whole that you're leading. One thing that just came to my mind when you were talking was an instance with a past employer when we shifted offices and people got to pick where they sit. And I was so confused that I was the only one who volunteered to sit in the middle of my team and all the other department heads sat together. I'm like, how can you, this is weird. Are we here to serve the person who leads the company, or are we here to serve the team that we're supposed to be the head of? And that's how I tend to think about it. It's you're supposed to be in a professional, not corporate, not professional, that word again, in a corporate setting, let's say, you're supposed to be leading a team usually, but I think you should be part of that. And what that means is being authentic and being vulnerable and knowing what you don't know and admitting when you don't know, admitting your mistakes, because again, you are part of that whole. You're not outside of that that whole. And if you treat yourself as if you're outside it, then I don't know how that whole would function. So for me, it's Ram used the word service leadership. Selflessness comes to mind, and maybe it's because in my role at Cocharia in the past 3 years, I've really come to understand that coaching and leadership or a coach and a leader are so similar. And in my view, the kind of leader that I want to be is the coach leader, the one that sees potential in people, that does what she can to make them thrive, to make them feel like they can achieve anything. And when they do achieve it, celebrate them, don't take credit for it, empower them. Yeah, I think leadership is more about others than it is about you.
Yeah, it's also a very interesting question for me, or the whole concept of leadership. And it's changed for me recently, I think over the last 2 years, when I began to do a PhD in leadership. And I realized how little I actually know about what leadership is and what a leader is, and began this journey of dropping whatever I knew and picking up pieces that were beginning to show up as more meaningful. So I consider myself a contributor or a partner in whatever I'm noticing. And if it gets my attention, then I want to contribute to it. And then I find I can't walk away from it. So perhaps that's a leadership quality. I'm not sure how to word it right now. And a few months ago, when Ram shares a story about how he notices somebody doing something and he wants to dive in there and, have some say about it. It doesn't matter how he says it. He just wants to have some say about it. And I was saying to him the one day in class, it sounds like you just can't be a bystander. You want to be involved and do something wherever you can. And I feel that quality shows up for me a lot, where I want to do something. I can't just sit back and watch. Yeah, that part shows inside quite a lot. And what I listen for inside me is also like, I feel sometimes it's like a burning flame or a desire or a passion or whatever you want to call it, to do something. Maybe the word is hero's journey, the first part of it, right? And then I find I want to do it. So that spurs me on to make a difference. So I think it's about the contributing and noticing and not being able to stand back, wanting to gently move whatever it is forward. Sometimes not so gentle. I know I can move it quite quickly, but it's that movement.
It's lovely, Cindy, that you've said this, and I could just feel that connect so strongly. And I'm going to come back to you for this one a little later, because I would love for you to share an example or narrative of a time when that happened. All of this, the burning flame and moving things ahead. Would love to listen in. But I'm just looking at the chat box, and there's this. Okay, it's just moved ahead. I think there was this comment from Manish. It's quite beautiful, and I think it connected to what you were saying as well. Leadership is the willingness to step up and take responsibility for steering a collective cause towards its goal. And that is actually egging me to go to another very important aspect of what we're talking about, and personally something which is very meaningful to me. That's all about courage. I know courage is a topic that we can explore for hours together, and there's lots that's been written and said, and all of that. But it would be lovely to unpack it, not just from a leadership lens, but also about, I think we all come from very diverse backgrounds, though we have coaching as a common connection in some ways. Maybe a little bit of a personal narrative as well about courage. And the specific aspect that I want to talk about is simply, what does courage mean to you? And what makes some people continue to hold courage closely, lean in, despite many hardships along the way, and some others let it go, and they find themselves holding back. Magda, I would love for you to start sharing your experience and perspective on this.
Sure. So to me, courage is doing the right thing, even though the consequences may not turn out well for you. And I never actually, until you asked this question, I never thought of myself as a courageous person, but I think maybe I have been, because doing the right thing is such a core driver for me. It's debilitating sometimes, frankly. And to tell you how debilitating it can be, I literally lost a really lucrative job because I stood up for people that I thought needed standing up. There was inequality that women were experiencing on my team, and I thought I did what I thought was right. And I no longer have the job a while back, so I'm not going to even talk about which one that was, but I think it's the right thing to do, because if you, whether it's in your personal life or whether it's at work, because others aren't always going to stand up, if you have that innate drive to do the right thing, you need to, because others may not. And the thing that is right to do will not happen. People not being courageous, how you get dictators, is how you get bosses, I won't call them leaders because they're not leaders, bosses in companies or in teams that tell you what to do. They don't care how it happens. They just want the laurels. They want the name. They want the acronym after their name, the award on their mantle. Like that's not leadership. That's a terrible person to work for. And yeah, courage is also, I'm just thinking as I'm talking, because it's not just about standing up for what's against things that are wrong, but also for what's right. And I'm just thinking about hiring as well. We're talking about leadership and professional type sphere. I hate looking at resumes, at CVs. I have not had one since 2005. I have my LinkedIn profile out of necessity, but I refuse to write a resume. And when I hire people, and this includes Coacharia, yes, of course, people send a CV because they think they need to, but I may glance at like the very, very basic thing. Like if you said that you know how to code in Python, I'm going to check that that's what you can do. But honestly, I don't really care. I care what kind of person you are. I care what kind of potential you have. I care as to what you can contribute. And to me, that's also, maybe it's foolish sometimes, but I think it's that's also courageous, because then you're lifting up people based on who they are and what they can do, and the potential they have versus just what they can write on a piece of paper from their past.
Ram, would you want to share what you're thinking about?
Yeah, one of the things that comes up for me, it's easier to talk about someone else in order to exemplify the quality. So I would follow Magda in talking about her from the time we started working together, where I mean, she had a tremendous amount of courage in one sense, in terms of, at that time she was on her own. She was doing pretty well as a consultant in marketing. And she came into Coacharia for nothing at all, to be honest. And it took time for us to build it to a level where even today, it's not the money, but it's throughout, it's been that belief in something that we can do something together. I think that's really a core quality of both courage and leadership as well. And in the process, we have gone through many spaces where in the earlier days, she used to ask me, I don't even know what the heck you're talking about. It's impossible. But then now, probably she dreams more courageously than I do in terms of going somewhere. Where because of my age and because of my certain experiences, I've been able to do it without too much of difficulty. But someone much younger than me in that space, she has shown exceptional courage. So it's that real belief in moving into a space that you don't know anything about, a change or whatever it is, you are working without a compass. And yes, of course, you have the fears, but you have the ability to face the fears. At the same time, you have the vulnerability to be able to admit, yeah, I can be wrong, and I'm sorry about that. And without sort of making it seem like it's a forced kind of a thing, but it's very genuinely coming out of you. I think all these factors build the courage. And I think that's the essential part of a leader as well. As you earlier said about the integrity, the belief in yourself, the belief in what you think you should stand for, the passion, the vulnerability, the humility. I think all these put together probably builds up into that character called courage, which enables you to do what you wish to do well. Yeah.
Wow. Cindy, with your permission, I'm just going to add on to what Ram said. I'm just inspired to share this. This is one of my all-time favorite quotes. And I quote Nelson Mandela, maybe not in entirety, but the sense of it. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. A brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but one who I think, conquers that fear. So the biggest fear one has to conquer, you know, in my view, is the fear of failure. I recollect, you know, and it's still very, very fresh in my mind, an incident from when I was maybe a child of 5 or 6. And this might be, you know, surprising for a lot of people who know me. I was called, you know, it was one of those fancy dress competitions where, you know, I was dressed up as the visionary poet Bharatiyar, and I had to recite some of his, you know, one of his poems in Tamil, which is my mother tongue and native language. After the first line, I just froze. And I think I still remember the, you know, the tears flowing down my cheeks. I just froze. And it's something I think it's just stayed on. But equally so, today I can smile about it, but equally so, I remember my mother's gentle voice telling me how it's perfectly human and okay to forget. And I think that completely changed my worldview of failure. And today, so much so that I am not hesitant to speak wherever I need to. And little would I have thought at that time that I could ever do public speaking, but that's something that I embrace today. So it's about overcoming that. And the other fear that I want to talk about, which is a big one for me, and is the fear of the unknown. For a lot of people who knew me early on in my career, and I know there are a few of my mentors here on this session today and friends. For me, making plans, you know, certainty, that confidence of knowing, all of that were quite sacrosanct. But I think, you know, over my life's journey, I've evolved, and I'm beginning to evolve. It's still work in progress, to be a person who can find joy in not knowing, and a joy in the sense of the unknown. And in some ways that set me free. I think being a coach has also certainly helped me here, because, you know, as we often say as part of coaching mindset, it is about being comfortable with not knowing. Finally, I think if I were to sum up, and I think I mentioned it earlier, it's about this eternal optimism, right? That any number of times you fall, you'll pick yourself up. I want to end with, you know, another favorite line from, you know, Professor Peter Hawkins from one of his classes, is about viewing life itself as one's best teacher. And I think that to me is a strong enabler to embrace the value of courage.
Okay. Yeah, I've been so absorbed in listening now, I forgot everything in my mind around courage. So I think for me, yeah, I remember what I want to say a few minutes ago. You know, living in a country that has transitioned from a system that embraced privileges to one kind and not to others, and transitioned to a more democratic space. So within that space, courage, I've had lots of moments of courage, small ones, big ones, and physical ones, you know, being called out for something because you're the wrong skin color or something like that. So courage for me was always that it doesn't matter what's going on in the environment. I could still move through it, push through it, and go right through it, not over it, under it, around it, but through it. So I think those are moments that stood out for me as being courageous. And in softer, simpler ways, it showed up a lot during this time of COVID, where, you know, I would switch on the news and feel, oh no, you know, so many people dying. I think we all went through this. And there seems to be no vaccine in sight or no resolution in sight. And I would find myself in a space that was really, you know, feeling quite saddened by it all. And somebody, lots of time you, Vijay, would send me a message, can we talk? I would go, yes. And listening to it, I have something to run by you. And I go, okay. And listening to the other person, I forgot exactly what I was stressed about. So I think that also taught me that courageousness adds more meaning when you're paying attention to other people. And you discover for yourself, I walked through this and I'm okay.
It's infectious, right? Sometimes.
Very.
I'm just noticing a lovely, you know, message from Harish on the chat box. Courage is about being and doing what you believe in without fear of failure. I think, yeah, that's a lovely summary, which I think touches upon, you know, bits of what we've all shared. And now might be the right time to, you know, connect the dots to the second part of what we wanted to speak about. And I think all of us, touched upon it when we spoke about leadership, that it's not so much, you know, about you, but it's about the collective. And that's my next question. And you know, any of you, whoever feels most inspired to talk about it, can go first. So this is interesting because, you know, as a leader, while we talked about self-leadership and, you know, its importance in also showing up as in leading others, how do you, or rather what draws you to go beyond yourself? I, me, you know, my life, my career, my trajectory, and, you know, navigating all of that, which is important. But to go beyond and connect with the collective. What is it, you know, truly in yourself that allows you to do that? Has the notion of the greater good ever energized or inspired you? How does that
Can I jump in?
you? Oh, sure, Magda.
Yeah, so because, as I said, doing the right thing is such a core thing for me. It's not even funny. And for me, that's what drives me. And that's how, when I look at courageous leadership, that's at the core. But what led me to this is awareness of my own, I'll call them gifts, because I'm trying to use words that are positive of myself. This is part of my growth. I've realized that certain gifts that I have is not really caring what other people think. It's in a good way, I think. It's being able to speak up, being able to just push through and do the right thing when it needs to be done, not just thinking about it, especially when others aren't able to do it for themselves. So whether, you know, it's voiceless or helpless in whatever situation you can think of a person, a creature. And I think ever since I've embraced the fact that I have certain gifts that others may not have, and I don't have many of the gifts that they have, i.e. patience, for example. I have 0 of that. That's when I realized that it's not just, it's a privilege, it's a duty, it's a privilege, it's an honor to be able to be courageous when the opportunity presents itself. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, because like even talking about this, I get riled up because so many things are coming up where, you know, I'll bring you back to when I was little even. So when I grew up in Poland, I was in Poland until age 12. I was a bully to the bullies. Like, I used to beat up boys that would beat up the girls. Or if a boy was pulling someone's hair, yank him. It helped that I was taller. So I'm not saying you should go and beat up people, but I've always had this, if you don't have the means, the will, the whatever to stand up for yourself, I'm okay to stand up for you. And that's always driven me. Other people may not be able to do something, I can. It's privilege and honor, but it's my responsibility to use those gifts, because otherwise, like, what am I, a waste of space? A waste of space and a waste of potential, to me, is the worst thing you could possibly be. So I have a long time ago decided that that's not who I'm going to be. I'm going to utilize the potential as much as I can in myself and in those around me.
Thanks, Magda. Thank you for sharing a bit of your, I think, personal narrative with us here today. Yeah, I mean, I never looked at it as, as sharing a gift. It's very, I take that perspective with me today. Cindy, I can watch you nodding and smiling. There's something that connects with you?
Yeah, everything's connecting today. And sadly, when things connect, I need quiet time. So having to talk is not always the best space to be in. Of course, we have to, it's in a webinar, but normally I would like to sit down quietly and think about it. So, doing for the greater good. I never thought about that. Like, doing for the greater good will show up, just shows up, right? Why, how, I haven't thought about that. So I don't feel any thoughts coming forward to say, why would I do that for the greater good? I'm very, very into doing things for the greater good. And I'm not sure how it shows up. Maybe somebody on this call can put words to whatever I'm saying. But it's almost like a sense inside, like you sense something and you know it, a knowing, and then you just do it. Maybe Magda's better at describing things. Yeah, like you sense something and this is what I'm going to do right now. And you just go ahead and do it. And sometimes I felt I've done things without any kind of thoughts. Like somebody would say, can you do that? I would say yes. And in the background, 2 days later, I would ask, what is wrong with you? Why did you say yes to that? Like a spontaneous yes. And then I find myself in the space of, that song, Greatest Gift of All. Remember that song? So yeah. I find all these songs that will keep me going until I do it right to the end, or that Gloria Gaynor, I would survive. So in those moments when I know I've said yes for the greater good, and I'm in a turmoil around it because something's not working out, or it's just me and my own insecurity, then I'll find something to spur me on and keep that flame going until I reach where I want to go. I'll find the lighthouse or the light that's burning.
Yeah, I've experienced that in you, Cindy, and you were saying you're looking for the words. That was one of the first few things that would always strike me. Maybe I, in my mind, saw it as generosity. But yeah, I think there is that element of it in really being concerned, because I would be quite amazed at your concern about, supporting coaches. And I don't think it was in a sense a very narrow job related thing, right? No. You would find genuine joy when the competencies or just that saw was sharpened. And I would wonder that there are people like that.
Yeah. think Ram is going to share, right?
Yeah, I was just about to invite Ram in.
Yeah. Okay. I think many of the coaches would be familiar with this concept of Maslow's hierarchy. What I have realized, experience over the years, is that there comes a point in your time, in your life, where you really move beyond the first four levels of what the Maslow's hierarchy represents in terms of the need for survival, need for safety, need for emotional validation, cognitive validation, and so on. And for some of us, it may never happen because we are still caught in that space of wanting to prove ourselves, the rat race, and that continues till late in life. For me, it took a long time, and it was probably some kind of a trauma, which at some point in time showed me the irrelevance of what I was driving myself to in terms of power, wealth, and so on and so forth, and how they can be so impermanent. So it was that which drove me into serious self-introspection. And I'm connecting to Maslow in a much later stage by understanding it. At that time, I didn't understand that. Through a kind of combination of circumstances, I suddenly realized that I had to become selfless in a sense, to be very selfish in terms of if I wish to be happy, if I wish to be fulfilled. Because just being selfish, just being looking out for myself in terms of trying to amass more and more, and as it's always been said, greed has no end whatsoever. Our wants have no end. But the needs truly have an end, and the needs are really not just your own needs, but also a combination of your needs in connection with other people's needs. The whole concept of Ubuntu, for example, which is about I am because we are, or the famous Isavasya Upanishad statement, which is about the person who sees himself in others and others in himself. And it became a real thing for me, not anymore a philosophy, not anymore an ancient wisdom, but that was the only state in which I could find myself centered, stable. And so I really, for me, moving to the collective, moving beyond myself, was essential for my own selfish reasons, as it were. That if I wanted to find happiness, then of course, I can make a glorious thing about it and saying, hey, this is what I did, and so on and so forth. But that's far from the truth. But when you do that, the results of that are truly amazing. Then what you wish for others happens to yourself as well. What took me such a long time, 5 decades of my life, what I'm so impressed and energized is by seeing much younger people today reaching that stage. Some not even in their 20s. And just the other day, I was with this group of people where youngsters put together by one of our coaches, Leah, and the energy which they were articulating what they wanted to achieve in life was nothing about themselves. Not one of the 8 people in that panel, and she is working with a group of about 30 people, was about what I want to be, or I want to be this or that, I want to be a star, I want to be a CEO, I want to be a millionaire. Many of their ambitions, passions, goals in life are about, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a mentor, I want to be able to change somebody's life. And I think that's really the reason why the earth will survive. Not because of people like me, my generation, the baby boomers who literally ground this earth to earth and screwed it up so badly. And much later in life, we realize what it is. I think people have to really understand that the only way that we, as well as our total environment, is going to survive is by going towards a larger collective good rather than our selfish good. It's as simple as that. It's really coming down from the fifth level of Maslow to the first lowest level of Maslow, that in order to in order to meet your survival needs, you need to meet your self-actualization needs. It's very funny. So Maslow is no longer a pyramid for me. It's a cyclical kind of wheel. That's what it is. Anyway.
Yeah, just thanks, Ram. I was remembering learning about Maslow's long time back, and I was just wondering how it would be for it to be cyclical, right? For me, I think this whole thing it all begins with our worldviews, right? How do we really see the world? As a human being, I think I'm quite enamored and energized by this largeness of the universe and the myriad possibilities that lie within. So in some senses, I think even before I became certified as a systemic coach, etc., I think my being, right, my systemic being was very strong for me. I always not just saw myself as a part of a larger whole. I think the largeness would just energize me. But equally so, I think as Magda mentioned, I felt that I mattered as an individual. I might be the littlest part, but that little part matters too. The other thing which is very strong, the way I look at the world is, this entire universe is beautifully connected. And at a heart, I think I'm a connector. And when you see all those connections, maybe not cognitively connect, but some way you just know they're connecting. You think naturally start thinking collective. You start being collective, and that gives you energy in many ways. Often, the world of sport teaches this, especially team sport, that you might be the very best player ever, but the real joy comes, I think, in the whole team winning. You can never be delighted winning, a man or a woman of the match when your team is lost. So yeah, I think this concept of greater good is very important to me as a person, as a leader. And often, I think, as both Cindy and Magda said, it's not a head-led choice. It comes from the heart, very strong heart space. I'm also thinking that there's lots of stuff coming in the chat box. I'm reading some of that, and I think there is a reference to Greta Thunberg, and some other lovely feedback. I think Puneet has mentioned something about giving back via coaching at this point of time. So it might be a good time for us to put all of this together. And I do remember telling you, Cindy, that we'll come back to it. And I want to actually start with Ram on this one. A time or a story or a situation in your life where all these three aspects, professional, courageous professional leadership, it all coming together for you. And Ram, if I might also prompt you a little bit, I know you've shared with some of us about how from a time when there was no coach training in India and people had to go outside of to even become coaches. Today, I think you've just made it so accessible. I would love for you, if time permits, for you to share a little bit of that journey and story.
Okay, actually, I'll reserve that story for something else. You had said that there is something about vision and dream that you would like us to talk about, and I would hold it for that. But at this point in time, and you included, there are at least another 3 or 4 in this group who would resonate with that, uh, being people from Hindustan Lever. Um, I was in my early 30s when I had come back from a pretty luxurious sojourn in Indonesia as an expatriate manager back to India. I was put on a cooler for a while. And then I was offered some choices. And one of them was this loss-making unit for several, probably a couple of decades or more, which in a highly criminal area in India, in a very rural village-like environment. And that's where my whole concept of barefoot leadership and many other things, which I now truly believe in, started. And I went there, I was clueless. I mean, I was till then an engineer running maintenance side of factories and projects and stuff. And this was the first time I really was going to operate a larger, in fact, it was not merely a cost center, it was also a cost and profit center because it was a unique kind of establishment out there. And totally, I was absolutely clueless, knowing nothing about it. And I had read some stuff about, I still remember the kind of Schumacher's Small is Beautiful and things like that, with tremendous amount of idealism to go there and do something about what needs to be done in a rural environment and so on. So, and some of the things that I faced there, first of all, it was a totally leadership challenge because I didn't really know what leadership was in that sense, truly. And the ability to form a team and work with a team was something that started at that point in time. And it was not merely the fear of failure or anything. It was, I don't know, I was probably a little mad, crazy, because that never occurred to me that I was going to fail. Whatever happened was fine with me. But that place was physically dangerous. It was a wild west of India. Every second person there carried a rifle or a gun, and people wouldn't hesitate to pull out a country gun and shoot you. And in that environment, I was a very binary kind of person at that point in time in my life. I never saw life in shades of gray. I always saw them as white and black. This is right and this is wrong. And I am the righteous person. I'm here sent by the good Lord above to correct the wrongs, which I still think sometimes, but I also see the shades of gray. So there was something that happened. It triggered off. I decided to sack the president of the union of that factory, and the whole factory went on strike. And those union leaders were, and believe you me, I mean, they could just as much kill you as, as curse you or whatever it is. For them, that came very, very easy. So one of the union leaders, he came to me and pulled out a gun and put it on my table and said, "You know what it is?" I said, "Yeah, I know what it is." "So you aren't afraid?" I said, "Not really, because if you wanted to have killed me, you would have already shot me. But the fact that you're putting it down and asking me questions, I don't think you have the guts to do anything with me. So fine, whatever happens will happen." And so anyhow, I mean, those are the kind of things, at least about maybe 3-4 times in my stay there for about 3 or 4 years. And our daughter was a baby. She was just about, I think, 6 months old, or not even that. When we went there, our son was about 5 years old. Our son used to go to the school nearby in a car which had a bodyguard with a gun in the front seat with a few other kids at the back. So, I mean, it required, yes, of course, there was something could have happened, but it was almost as if there was no choice and do whatever you did and moved along with that and building a team. And this, the beautiful thing that happened was that there was such a beautiful relationship that formed amongst a few people who were there, and that has lasted till today, 20, 30 years later. And of course, many of you who have been with Levers, you also know that it's really the culture of Levers to have that familiarity, which I'll talk about later when I talk about Kocharya. And so, yeah, when you talked about an example where all these came together, that's the first time in my life, and that was truly a game changer for me. And we did some things which were probably near miraculous, helped to establish that whole place in a sustainable, profitable mode. And every single person, in fact, every single management trainee in Levers went through that program. And I'm sure, Vijay, you did too, probably if you joined as a management trainee. That was much later in life. So tremendous amount of memories. It's a tremendous experience that helped me to shape my life. Thanks.
Thank you, Ram. I went down memory lane as well. And just bringing myself back here. Cindy, you want to go next? Or do you need more time? Are you reflective?
Magda, you want to go?
I can always talk, you know that.
Yes.
So the example that came to my mind is not the example I thought was going to come into my mind, but I'm going to share what occurred to me. So through coaching, and hence the professional tie-in, Ram has been really, really helpful to me. I mean, I've talked about different stuff in different contexts about, you know, the personal obstacles that I've overcome in the past few years. But a big change for me was earlier this year when I went on Instagram and I went live and I checked my weight live on Instagram. I pointed it to the scale and I did it. And it took a long time for me to get there, and I was irrationally scared of doing that. But the reason I did it is because in the back of my mind, I kept saying to myself, you know, like if you have issues about that and you have gone through such a transformation and you think of yourself as a confident person who can stand up for others, if you have any kind of about taking your own weight, imagine how other women feel, and men, frankly, right? But we know it's a big thing with women. And I thought to myself, like, come on, Magda, like, what's the worst that could happen? Someone calls you fat. Do you care? No. What's the best that could happen? Somebody else will be like, oh yeah, that's, you know, I feel better about myself. So I did it with just thinking, if one person sees this and has a positive effect on them, I'm good. I think I did my part. And what happened was amazing. I mean, I had so many emails and messages from people that I knew and that I didn't know, sharing personal stories about their struggles with their bodies. Some it was weight, some it was a scar, some it was whatever. People shared about their eating disorders, and some that I knew personally, right? So people were like, oh my gosh, Magda, like I always thought of you as this person who is healthy and fit and whatever. And in my mind, you were like maybe 130 pounds, not 173. It's a little bit more now, but you know, whatever, COVID, COVID 10, COVID 5, we all have one. And the reason why this example came out for me, it was, you know, it's not something in the office or in a professional setting, but I did it because I realized that I knew that to someone or to many someones, they see me as a leader of some sort. They see me as a figure of authority of some way. And I knew that there's going to be at least one person who will benefit from that relationship, that worldview that they have. And I thought it was the right thing to do. And honestly, like it's paid dividends to no end for me personally and for other people. And it's been, I think it was in February, it was before COVID, I think, started. And I still get random messages and I still think about it as like this switch for me where I just figured, you know what, yes, like just do it. If you have the ability to do it, you have the responsibility to do it as well.
Bravo, Magda. Nina tells me sometimes about the crazy things that you do on Instagram. But she says, you don't have to look at it. And I said, okay, fine.
She's talking about my mammogram yesterday. I had my first mammogram on Tuesday, and they wouldn't let me film it because, but I took a picture with the mammogram machine. So all you ladies, get checked out once you turn 40. Apparently, it's what you're supposed to do.
And you wanted to film it.
Say again?
You wanted to film that? You wanted to film your mammogram?
Oh, I wanted to. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me.
I don't know whether it's good on them or not good on you.
I know. I was gonna blur things. I was gonna blur them. Don't worry. But you know.
Okay, blurring is good. Okay, mine. So a moment stands out, or a particular example stands out here. When I became the chapter leader for ICF South Africa, the curious stats part of me always want to figure things out, you know, how many coaches we got, how many are credentialed, what is their levels. And I always have this big interest in credentialing and professional development, as you call it. But at that point, I realized our coaches were only about 47% credentialed. It's quite a big chapter, but just 40% of the coaches are credentialed. And just on an instinct, I thought, well, let's do a credentialing drive and get everybody involved in credentialing. So I shared this with a colleague on the board. I said, no, we should do a credentialing drive. And she said, how do you see it unfold? Well, of course, you know, that's a difficult question to ask me, because for me, as the process goes along, I'll get new ideas and new innovations and it'll unfold. So I don't have to have a strategy up front. It can emerge at the end. Anyway, she kept asking questions about putting this together. And I thought, listen, all I want is to make them some exciting offer. And the offer I could is mentoring. Mentoring is needed for coaching. So why don't I just offer people 3 free mentoring sessions and let's see what happens. And we had lots of conversations on the glass half empty, you know, what if this doesn't work, that doesn't work, with many people in the board. And I thought, well, what if it does work? And what if a lot of people sign up? You know, I'm putting myself at risk here, you know, how am I going to mentor everybody? Long story short, the good part was that many coaches signed up. And within a few short months, our credentialing moved from that 47 into almost 80%. We are credential coaches as a chapter. But the funny thing happened after that, because whenever a coach saw me, they would always explain about the credentialing. You know, I'm going to apply, Cindy, you know, one of these days, it's almost there, Cindy. So I thought to myself, so I guess this is what influence means, you know, because leadership qualities is not something you think about in yourself. As it begins to show up, then you put words to what's going on. So I think for me, that one stands out about, you know, making a difference or an example that I think taught me about myself also in the process. It showed up for a bigger picture, with a bigger picture. But I think in the process, I learned a lot about myself too.
Yeah, there you go, Cindy. I'm sure there are many more stories that you could bring in. Yeah, it's my turn. So, so I'm going to talk about, and this is not a thing of the past. It's very real, very live, and I think been a major part of my life. You know, in times of COVID, I know there are a few friends here from, you know, the movement that I'm going to talk about who are on this call. And first of all, my gratitude to each one. So I think early this year in March, you know, when you know, nobody knew what was going on. Right? There was this urge, I think, in some of us to say that, hey, we need to do something. What do we do as coaches? Can we do something? Can we and the usual things that comes to one's mind: support a community, give financial support, do many other things. But I think somewhere, I think that's where this whole professional thing, saying that as a coach, what difference can I make? And the biggest difference that I can make as a coach is to offer coaching, and is to really see, this is a test for coaching, as whether it can hold and give support for people, emotional and mental support in these crazy times. It was a wild thought, and because there were questions, a lot of questions, credibility questions, and so on and so forth. Yeah, in a community, in a country where the knowledge of coaching is, I would say, pretty low. And we wanted to reach out, not necessarily to a very corporate audience who probably would have some idea and understanding of coaching, who would anyway possibly have support mechanisms. But we wanted this to be available for anyone, irrespective of where they came from, what category they came from, which part of the country, so on and so forth. So we started Coaches for You. And it was a beautiful, spontaneous, organic movement, which started off with just 10 coaches. And just with that strong intent and belief that as a coach, we are going to show up, and coaching can make a difference. So much so that today there are 320 volunteers in this movement. What started off as an India-only initiative spread, and we have people with just through stories and word of mouth coming, joining in, saying that I want to coach too, I want to do this too, I want to help. Can I help? Can I help in this way, that way, right? And it takes a lot. And I'm sure Magda and Ram, running such a big organization, how difficult it is. And we had nothing. We didn't have an organization structure, funds, nothing at all. Just intent and the belief and faith that we need to show up for the larger good. So proud to say that on the last count, we've done about 550 plus coaching conversations from people from all walks of life, which is what we wanted, and truly sort of live up this thing saying that coaching is for everyone and coaches can help. To me, this was courageous because the path was not easy. Lots of pinpricks, lots of naysayers, like you said, Cindy, lots of people not saying no because they were not for it, but just the fear of the unknown, right? Just not knowing. How do you know? Prove it. Do you have a plan? Don't have a plan, but have intent and have faith in the profession. So beautiful story. We'll save it for another time, but still figuring out every day, still figuring out a lot of the unknown, but very real. And I must say, never done something like this in my life before. I never thought I would. Cindy, I think you're on mute.
So I think, Vijay, considering the time, I'd like to hear Ram's story. Ram, tell your story, because we got very little time. We want to hear your story. And
okay,
then we can
given the time, I'll also be pretty brief. First of all, I'd like to, the whole thing was about, Vijay had asked us, what's your dream and what is it that you want to make with your dream and so on and so forth. So, and I think, Vijay, what you did with the Coaches for You is itself an example of that. It's a powerful dream that you enacted and made it into a reality. And I remember discussing it way back and the challenges that you went through. It is truly an amazing one. For me, Kocharya was completely a dream. And there are a couple of people who were my inspiration in this, or both in this cohort now in the audience. It was R.R. Nair, my colleague from Weavers way back, who I reached to him at a point in my life where I was really at crossroads, and I was struggling to find something to do with a purpose. And he said, why don't you become a coach? I didn't even know what the heck a coach was. But anyway, I decided to take him up on his word because I was impressed by the sincerity with which he said that. And so I was a completely accidental kind of movement into coaching. And after I had done my program, somehow or other, it really resonated extraordinarily well for me. And that was when I was looking out to see how I can sort of do something about coaching, make a living out of coaching. Not that I really needed the money or anything, but there was something that I needed to occupy myself. And one of my friends suggested, why don't you go and, if you really want to do something about it, you need to understand the people who are in that field, who give you the jobs as coaches and so on. And so why don't you go and join the NHRD, National HR Development Network? And that's when I met Harish. So spent about 6 months with a group of people with Harish. At that point in time, yeah, I was doing some odd kind of coaching and stuff like that. But I always wanted to be some kind of a trainer, teacher, whatever. I love teaching. And so I was doing some teaching work at the B schools and all that stuff. And at some point in time, the conversation with Harish and a few other people I was involved in at that time came up as, if we would always like to be coaches. So if you would train us, and we want to do directly with you. And that is how Kocharya started. And I sort of visualized, and by that time I was practicing because of a kind of a spiritual journey that I was in. I was very attracted towards visualizing, which is a dream, but a dream with a specific purpose. And I saw myself sitting in a room with about 25 people. And well, within less than a month or a month and a half, I had actually exactly 25 people, 26 people had registered, one person dropped out. So the 25 people in the classroom, that's how Kocharya started. And thanks to those people who came together, and many of them were friends of Harish, and with the support, we never looked back, and it has grown to where it is. But at no point in time, I really knew what was going to happen. And at some point in time, yeah, with my son, we started Kocharya in the US. And at some point in time, Cindy came into our lives. At some point in time, met Magda, and she accepted. She came and said, okay, she would take charge. And in the initial stages, we used to have these arguments about kind of things that you were asking me to do. How the hell are they going to? Are you mad? And I said, just believe. Things will happen. And today, I'm absolutely shocked when Magda turns around and tells people in front of me, yeah, if you believe the universe will make it happen. I said, great, that is good. So that's true. If you really dream, and if you dream for a larger good, a larger cause, and the universe does conspire to make that happen. So I think life is nothing if you don't dream. And for me, that's a very real part of my living. And this is how Kocharya has evolved. And today, fortunately, we have got many of you like you, for instance. Each one of you is fulfilling your own dreams. And my hope is that by encouraging a lot more people like that to fulfill their dreams, that is where the growth of Kocharya is going to be. And that is where it is going to grow. It's not my dream or Magda's dream, but a collective dream of multiple people, each one of them fulfill their dreams. And we just provide a platform, the wherewithal, if we can be of support to them. And that is how we are going to grow. And that is true democratization of coaching as we see it. And that's going to be ultimate, whatever value that we can add to this profession and vocation. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ram. I think that was the perfect inspiration to probably bring the session to an end. But yeah, I mean, Cindy, Magda, if there's a one statement dream that you have right now in your heart, please say it here, because you know, there is that power of saying it in this space.
I think for me, the dream would continue being just to be inspired by the world, by waking up every morning and wanting to move forward. So simple, small dreams, and wanting to contribute and make a big difference. Now, in the details of how, haven't thought about it yet. And of course, I didn't attend all of Ram's session on Create Your Future. My fault. So I'm still thinking about those parts, but I'll figure it out. Thanks, Vijay. It was absolutely wonderful being in discussion with you, Ram, and Magda.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah, so it's funny that Ram shared what he just shared, because I feel like I'm dreaming a bit bigger nowadays. And earlier I said it's not even that I'm dreaming. I feel like not just me, but the team, like we're doing it. The thing I'm about to say. I truly believe, now that I understand what coaching is, I understand what leadership is, and I understand how interrelated they are, I truly believe that anyone can be a leader. We have different paths to get there, but anyone can do it, and anybody can be a coach. And what Coacharya will become and is becoming is that thing, that platform, whatever you want to call it, to enable anybody to be their best self, to be that leader and to be that coach. And we are doing it. Ram referred to Leah's program earlier. It's our first, we're calling it Youth Leadership Program. And we're starting with 18 to 25-year-olds, but we're going to expand this to younger people, and we're going to have programs basically for anybody. I mean, even kids can learn this stuff. What Coacharya will become is the place you go to when you have a question, you have a purpose, like Cindy, that I'm going to continue, I'm going to become something. We will be the place where you can go and you can find the how. Whatever that path is for you, we will be there to help you out with a variety of things through our coaches, through our community. And we are doing it already. We're going to continue doing it. And honestly, I talk about being excited a lot, but I'm excited for a reason. It's not because I'm an excitable person only. I love shiny objects and puppies. But I really, really, really believe in what we're doing. And with every person that finishes training with us or comes to a webinar, doesn't pay us a single dollar, because this is a business, but that's not what it's about, right? I get emails and comments from people saying things that, because of this thing I've read or this webinar in person I listened to, I feel differently in this way, or I'm going to do something. And oh my God, how cool is that? And we're doing it. We're going to continue doing it. And it makes me really, really happy.
Amen to that.
More power to you, Magda. And
more power to us.
I'm going to absolutely going to round this up. I'm inspired to say mine. My dream for the profession is, coaching becomes accessible, simple, and truly for everyone. And really, coaching being on par with some of the more recognized professions. Never should a coach be asked a question, oh, I'm a coach. And, the other person not knowing who you are and what is it that you do. Coaching being on par with other professions like the medical profession, the legal profession, and so on and so forth. And why not? And I think all of us coaches, and this is my invitation for all the coaches on this call, to really think about that and to see how can our profession show up. So with your permission, I think we'll say our byes for today, and we'll take the pause, and I hope that the conversation will continue. Thank you everyone who's been with us today, putting in your comments, putting in, your not so much questions, but your experience and inspiration. I think it's just super valuable, and I hope we can save this chat, Magda.
Definitely will. And thank you to you, Vijay, for leading today, and to our panelists, and for attending for the past 5 weeks. It's been a journey, and in some ways, I think we bit off more than we can chew, but we had some amazing experiences and learning, and all the videos are on our YouTube channel. So everybody, please subscribe and tell your friends. We're Coacharya everywhere. So find the social thingy and just look for Coacharya, you'll find us. But this is the beginning, not the end. Please reflect on the things you've learned. Please take the things you've learned and put them into action in your families, in your communities, in your workplaces, but most importantly in yourself, because this is where change always starts, right? If you can't change this, you're not going to change this. So let's use Awake, Aware, Arise as the starting point. And as those of you who've known us for a while, we'll be back here with more webinars. We are live with a webinar every Wednesday, 9 p.m. India, other places, different times because of daylight savings, but 9 p.m. India is the steady time on Wednesday when you can expect something as inspirational as today, as inspirational as this whole conference has been. So please join us. Please tell your friends and colleagues, because with your support is how we grow, and with your support is how we can make all these dreams that we just talked about come true. Us talking about them is going to get us nowhere. You participating is how we're going to continue delivering all this awesomeness. So with your permission, Raman, Cindy, and VG, I'm going to say goodbye and closing the conference, but just opening the conversation.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks,
Bye.
Lee. Thanks, Magda.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.